My goal for these two was to limit my palette, and that is always a challenge for me. Stick around and see how they came together. All right, let's get started. Hello and welcome. This is Betty with Betty Franks Art, and as always, I am super happy to have you here with me today. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I am so glad that you found me. If this is the first video that you're watching, I think you're going to enjoy it, but please know that I've got many others. If you just go over to my homepage, you will be able to see all the different ones that I have, both working on canvas and working on paper. And then I also have a section, if you scroll down the page a bit, a section on art business. And if you're an artist trying to learn how to run your art business, I've got some videos to help you out. All right, so we got started here as I was talking. I'm working on two 30 by 30s, and these are both, these are not for a commission, but they were purchased, I think, last year for a commission that I did, and I had to buy them in bulk. So I had two more left over, and I thought, well, let's use them. And I really like this size. If you know me, you know that I often work on a 36 by 36. So this is a little bit smaller. So I was able to work on two of them at the same time. Now I started off with my mark making, which I love to do. And the mark making doesn't show in the final steps of this or the final piece, but it's part of my process. It's all about loosening up, connecting to that canvas, relaxing a bit, getting into the motion of creating, the motion of moving my arms in a certain way that is comfortable to me and that I'm used to. And it's kind of like a warm-up, I guess. So that's what I did in the beginning there. And then I go right into using a black color. And here, you know, you can tell I'm wearing a tank top here, and I'm recording this, doing the voiceover. It is December 30th, 2021. And obviously, I didn't do this last week because it's like the upper 40s, low 50s in my studio, which is pretty darn cold. This was during the summer months, and I'm just now getting around to doing the voiceover. So what I was talking about, what was I talking about? Now I just lost my train of thought. That's all right. We'll just move on from here. I was talking about the black paint. Okay, that's where I was getting at. So I have a jar of black paint now that I use that is actually a mix of a lot of other colors as well. And the reason I did that, where I threw in some red, some green, some blue, was to kind of deepen that black so that it wasn't just the black coming straight out of the jar. And it adds more complexity to that color when you mix it with other colors. And looking at it here, I can't remember if back when I actually created these two pieces, if I had already mixed that black with other colors or if I was just pulling it straight out of the jar. I've done it both ways. Both ways works. You know, this black hardly shows at all in the very final piece. It's just there to create depth for my paintings, and I put a lot of it on there because I don't know where I want it to be poking through and showing. So the more I add, the more options I have later. Here I'm going into orange, and looks like I just used it straight out of the jar because I really like that orange out of the jar. There's some colors that I just really don't like straight out of the jar, and most colors I will mix, and later on you'll see me mixing a lot more. But early in these early stages, I don't always do as much mixing of my colors. It really depends. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. That pink there, I think that's the fluorescent pink, which I really love. It's just such a punch of color, especially when I mix it with some white. Now here, instead of using a brush, I'm using my palette knife just to add the paint a little bit differently so it's not always with a brush stroke. Add some variety. And I was also kind of scratching right into that wet paint and building up some texture. I love texture. I love seeing those bumps and lumps and lines that are created by scratching into wet paint. So it's exciting. This is the last day before the end of the last day of the year. And 2021 was certainly a interesting year again. It, as always, went by so fast. And I know I said that at the beginning of 2021, that it was going to go by fast, and sure enough, it did. But it was a great year for me. I truly enjoyed this year. I created a lot of art. I did some traveling as well, especially overseas to see my parents, to help take care of them because they're getting older now. So it's kind of been, between traveling to see them and doing this and teaching workshops, the year is going to go by fast, right? When you've got lots of stuff going on, and there's never a dull moment. I guess that's the way I want to say it. And I like it that way. So I'm continuing here. Now, if you know my process, which some of you do, so thank you for coming back and watching another video. I love to stick with either warm colors or cool colors when I'm creating. So in this particular one, I decided to start with warm colors. So those are your reds, your oranges, your pinks, yellow is included in that. That is so that I don't create mud right away. Sometimes I want to create mud because I like a good neutral color, so I'll mix my cool and my warm together. But to get the vibrant colors that I really love, I keep my colors very clean in the sense that I don't, I want to say cross-contaminate, but that seems like such a bad way to say it. But I'm just not mixing those cool colors and warm colors. That way my colors are staying true and bright and vivid. And that's what I love about creating what I do, what I create, and which is my love for fields of flowers. My love for flowers is what I'm representing in my artwork. All right, so it looks like I took a break there, another day, so you can tell. Wintertime is really hard to tell if it's a different day because I wear pretty much the same warm clothing each time. But summertime, I can tell because it's easier to see what shirt I'm wearing. So here I've come in and I'm treating this like it's a new canvas, and I'm starting off with mark making again, putting down a whole bunch of lines. Now, some of these might show through on the final piece. And I really love that looseness and that way of putting down marks that I'm not controlling. I'm just throwing them on and not worrying about where they're going to show up. Now I'm adding gesso to my palette there. And since I did this recording lately, like past couple of months, I've been using titanium white more and more as opposed to gesso for my white. Now I've used gesso for my white for years. I would say probably like 4 or 5 years now. And I love using it for my white. A couple of reasons why. One is I use so much of it that it was very cost effective. Oh, here I'm going to show you. I'm using yellow medium and blue green. And I think, that's Azo. Yellow medium. I think what I was trying to do here is I'm trying to limit my palette. Besides the fact that I already started off with a bunch of warm colors on this second layer, and you'll see in these subsequent layers, I am limiting my palette somewhat. But honestly, I'm not good at limiting my palette because I love all colors and I love working with a lot of colors. But in this particular case, I was really challenging myself to do that. All right, so I lost my train of thought where I was going with the other conversation I had. So if I remember it, I'll come back to it. So I'm here just putting down marks. I'm thinking a little bit about composition right now. I'm thinking about getting some large elements put into here, and because I've already got kind of some medium size and some smaller ones and some filled in areas. So I'm thinking about, what can I add that's going to add some interest? And one of my ways to do that is to add the larger elements. And it's interesting because I just created one, and it's a recording I just did in my small sketchbook journal. And, I'm looking at this right now as I'm doing my voiceover, and I'm thinking, man, I think that was one of the things that I didn't do a whole lot of in my sketchbook, is think about those larger elements right from the start. I was doing a lot of smaller ones. I love that green. So that green is made with yellow and with that blue that I showed you. And I love that. And plus some white in there as well. Now I've changed out my brush here so that I can get some different types of marks. I'm using a pretty big brush up until this point. I think it's like maybe a 14, size 14 maybe, or a 12. And then I switched to something a bit thinner. And I'm going to switch throughout my creating process, switching out different brushes, because it's going to give me different sizes of mark making if I do that. And then I also like switching out round brushes to a flat brush, because it gives me a different application onto the canvas. With the flat brush, I tend to have corners on it because it's flat. I love when I drop my brush too. And I normally don't go this fast. This video was sped up so that I can keep it right about the hour mark. Otherwise, you guys would be in here for quite a while. So anyway, going back to brushes, I've got a list of my favorite art supplies that I'm going to link down below in the description. But really, a lot of them I end up buying like when I go to Michael's. Now, if you're in the States, you probably know Michael's. It's a craft store. They've got a paint section, and whatever's on sale, or if I've got a coupon, I'll give a different brush a try. And by doing that, I kind of start to learn, what kind of brushes I like and which ones I don't like. So I encourage you to do that as well. If you're just getting started, or you need to just mix it up a bit, go out there and buy a couple of brushes that you don't have or you haven't tried before. Now, I don't like to spend a whole lot of money on my brushes. I think a lot of these I end up spending less than $10, and I usually have a coupon with that. So I don't like to spend a lot because I really beat up my brushes. I don't, I don't treat them delicately, because it's all about the process of painting and creating, and not about, am I taking nice care of my brush? So I need my brushes to work hard for me. And I find that, if I buy one that's less expensive, that I don't worry about it. I do have a brush that I did spend I think it was $25. Whoa, way too much in my opinion. But you know what? I rarely use it. It's so precious, I'm afraid I'm going to ruin it, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous way to think, because then it stops you from using it, and it stops you from creating with it, because you're too worried about the money that you invested in it. So, and that goes the same for my paints. I love using Nova Color paints. I'll put a link down below to my favorite Nova Color paint colors that I like to use. I use a variety of them, but I've kind of narrowed them down to a handful that I pretty much always use. And what I found was, when I was starting off painting, I was using golden paints, which are absolutely gorgeous. They are beautiful. But I was finding myself afraid to take any out of the jar or out of the tube, because I was doing a lot of heavy body paints back then, because it cost me so much for that paint that I was afraid to, leave it out to dry or use up too much of it, which, is ridiculous. Using up too much of it isn't a bad thing. That means you're using the paint and you are creating with it and you're expressing yourself with it. So when I discovered Nova Color paints, or someone told me about it, is the way I discovered them. It was at a workshop, and several of the artists were using Nova Color, and I had an opportunity to try it out. And then I ended up buying their small 4-ounce jars to try out different colors, to figure out which colors I liked the best. And then once I figured out which colors I liked the best, then I started buying the larger, the pints and the quarts. But going back to, that whole thing about cost, the last thing you want when you're creating is to be worried about, what did that cost me? Right? Because that's just going to stifle your ability to freely express yourself. So with Nova, not only do I love their paints, but the cost of the paints is so affordable that I don't worry about it at all. I put out as much as I think I'm going to use. Even if I don't use it all, I don't stress about it. Sometimes I'll have an extra canvas laying around and I'll just throw extra paint onto it. But a lot of times, I use up most of it, so I don't worry about it drying up on my palette. All right, so so here's an example of, this was done in my sketchbook, and those are the colors that I'm trying to use in this painting. Now, is it going to look anything like that one? No, it's not. But I use it as an inspiration when I'm trying to, do something and I'm not sure what I want to do. Then I'll often turn to my own pieces or colors that I've used in the past as an inspiration. Just like the pieces that you see over on the right side, those are just Costco prints of pieces that I've done in the past that I liked a lot and that I will look at on occasion if I get stuck, and look at one and say, okay, well, what's working in that one that I haven't done in the piece that I'm currently working on. And I've also got some over to the left side, which is off the camera, but I'll reference those sometimes too. If I'm feeling stuck and not sure where to go next, I'll look at those to say, what worked in there? Was it the colors? Was it the mark making in it? Was it, the values in it? And that just kind of helps me get me moving forward again if I'm feeling a bit stuck. So when I'm using a limited palette, like I am here, I'm trying to limit it to those two colors. I do like my limited palette with that little punch of either the warm or the cool color, depending on which one I'm using. So for example, here I've got the punch of the warm color. So I do like that poking through a little bit here and there when I'm trying to just narrow the number of colors that I'm using. So it's not truly 100% limited palette in that regard. But if you are interested in doing that, I've got a video where I created just using black and white. And that really forces you to look at values and be able to create a piece that has interest in it using just black and white. So I'm going to go ahead and I will put that right up here for you so that you can check that out. Okay, so we're about middle stages here, and I just touched on values. So for example, here, the values are very much all in the mid-range, other than what I'm adding now is a much lighter value, and you can really see how that stands out compared to the rest of it. So one of the things that I'm looking at when I'm looking at my artwork, when I get to a certain point, and I certainly don't do this at the very beginning, oftentimes I'll do it, maybe a layer or two into it, I'll start thinking about values. So I'm bringing in the lighter values. I already have the darker values. So if you see that black is still showing through in quite a few places, those are my darker values. We can create darker values with, let's say, the turquoise blue. I can deepen that a bit more. But in this case, I've got mostly those blacks poking through. Now, a great way to look at values is you can take a picture with your phone, with your camera phone, and you can convert that to a black and white, and that'll give you a sense of, do you have light areas and do you have some really dark areas, or are you looking at it and it's all just kind of all in these really mid-tone grayish colors. And so why are values so important? They're important because your eye is going to first go to that spot where it's really light and really dark. And that's where your eye, it's not going to be like the punch of red. It's going to be, if there's a punch of white, your eye is going to go there first. So that's why values are so important. All right, so clearly another day. I'm rubbing my hands across it because sometimes there's these nibs, I don't even know what to call them, but it's dried paint. And sometimes it's just sticking out a little too much for me. So I like to knock those back. All right, so here we've got blue-green. That's what we were using yesterday. And yeah, we're back to the same thing, the Azo Yellow Medium. So I guess I'm showing, oh, and we're gonna go with phthalo blue this time. So introducing one more color. And carbon black. Oh, okay, so yes, okay, so I wrote mixed gray. All right, so, and it's really not a gray, it's mostly black, but I guess I had mixed it so that it's not just straight out of the jar. So this piece is starting to come together. You can see some of the lighter values I've added, but it's got quite a ways to go still. Now, if you are enjoying my video, I would love it, so appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up here. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, if you can subscribe to my channel and you'll be hit the bell so that you're notified of other videos that I release. And the reason I'm reaching out to you and asking you, please like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to it, because as of this recording at the end of December 2021, I have surpassed 60,000 subscribers. And my goal, I've set a goal for 2022 is to hit 100,000 subscribers. So I would love your help in helping me achieve that goal. And the way you can do that is really simple, just hitting that like. And also, if you can leave me a comment below, you can ask me a question. Let me know, what are your favorite Noah color paints if you're using them. Just about anything, because that helps me out a lot too. It lets YouTube know that people are commenting and they're interested in my video, and then they end up serving it up to more folks so that new folks will be able to see it. So you're not just helping me, but you're helping folks who are looking for this type of artwork, this style of art, and they'll discover it because YouTube will serve it up to them. So I'll just do a big shout out thank you in advance now if you're already did those things. I really appreciate it. So here I'm filling in, adding some of that blue that I had showed you, the phthalo blue, and I'm sure I probably added some white to it. And so looking at this, at this stage, I can see I've got some medium marks, I've got some smaller marks, I've got some larger elements happening, or larger marks. And that's all good for composition. The other thing I'll be looking at as I work my way through this is, can each one stand alone and can they work both together? So if someone was to buy both of them, I want them to work together so that they're like almost one piece. But if it was to sell separately, I want each one to be able to stand on its own. So that's always a little bit of a challenge. And you'll see towards the end how I'm working on them individually to make sure that they'll work by themselves, but yet at the same time work together. At this point, we can also notice that those warm colors that I did in that very early stage, you can barely see. Although I've got a jar of red in my hand right now. Let's see what I'm going to do with that. Well, I did have red in my, I'm wondering if I mixed it and made more of a purplish color. I may have mixed it with the blue to create a deep purple color. I wouldn't be surprised if I started introducing some other colors. Like I said, I just have this deep love for color and have such a hard time limiting myself. Are you able to see at this point how this is kind of a landscapey feel to it? To me, those lighter areas that are about midpoint, it's got that kind of landscape feel. If you're on social media, you can certainly find me there as well. I love hanging out on Instagram, so you can find me there under Betty Franks Art. Also on Facebook, a great place for me to hang out as well. Lots of great folks that I meet and chat with there. And then I'm on Pinterest too. Now, I'm not quite as active, but you'll find a lot of my art on Pinterest. I guess because Pinterest isn't a very social place to be, it's more of a destination place. You go and you find things that you want and you pin them and you share them, or you make notes about what you want to do. I know I've been on Pinterest oftentimes, like when I was working on my backyard and redesigning it, I was on Pinterest looking at ideas. So it's a great place for that. But not so much about being social and chit-chatting back and forth. Now, one other thing that I did earlier today, it's been a very productive day for me, I must say, and that is I sent out an email to my email list letting them know about a workshop I'm going to be doing in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the end of June, beginning of July 2022. Super excited about that. It's going to be so much fun to kind of get away from my everyday place and go out there and teach. I taught in New York City last year. Oh, well, no, I should say this year because we're at the end of December. In July, I was in New York City. Yes, it was hot, but I love the heat, and I had such a great time. It was a 2-day workshop, and the folks were just wonderful. Everybody was vaccinated, and we didn't wear masks, which was really, it was so nice not to worry about that. And there were no reports of anybody having COVID after that workshop. So it was definitely a very successful workshop. The one that I'm going to teach in Santa Fe is going to be a 3-day workshop. So excited about doing a 3-day. I'm finding that when I teach my 2-day workshops, that folks feel, I think, maybe a little rushed and like there's not enough time to absorb everything that I'm teaching. So I decided to do a 3-day workshop where we're going to have a little bit more time to slow it down a bit and do more exercises and have more free time to create and just enjoy that whole process. So if you're not on my email list, I highly encourage you to join. I always notify my email list first, give them first opportunity to sign up, and you'll find a link down below. If you can't find the link for any of the stuff that I'm talking about, just leave me a comment below. I am checking my comments. I respond like usually within 48 hours. I'm responding to almost every single comment. But yeah, if you can't find these links, just leave me a note below and I will be happy to send that directly to you. So I'm coming back in here with some lighter values. And this is slowly starting to really come together. And it's interesting, even as I watch myself creating, I'm always fascinated by this whole process, to be honest with you. To me, it's just, when I'm in the zone and I'm doing the work, I'm very focused on, well, first of all, in my ear, I am listening to probably, I think at this point, I was still listening to a lot of books on audiobooks. So I'm sure I'm listening to an audiobook. If not, lately I've been listening to podcasts again. I kind of go back and forth between listening to audiobooks and listening to podcasts. And so I'm very in the zone of listening to the story being told in my ear and just creating. But at the same time I'm thinking about composition, I'm thinking about my colors, I'm thinking about the elements, the size of the elements. Do I have enough variety in everything? Even things like hard edges and soft edges, quiet areas, and to me, a lot of mine is like noisy areas. So I tend to find corners to be my quieter areas. Like the one I'm working on right now, if you look in the upper left corner, that's a quieter area. Or the one on the right, the lower corner, is a quieter area. So I'm looking for all of those things, even as I'm listening to this book. And what I found many years ago, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know my story already, but I'm going to repeat it for the folks who are new here. And that is, I learned many years ago that when I listen to words being spoken, that I am freer creating. I don't have that little devil sitting on my shoulder questioning, like, Betty, why did you put that color there? Or why are you mixing those colors? Or why did you put down that mark? Or all of those things that those negative things that we start hearing. And what I found was, if I listen to words being spoken, that it really quieted down that part of my brain so that I can just create. And ever since I discovered that, I rarely will listen to music. I am always listening to somebody talking about something, or a story being told. And to me, it's almost like my little secret way of getting through my paintings. It's without it, I don't know that I could do as great of a job as I do now in terms of getting through my paintings in the amount of time that I get through them. I feel like before I would stop too many times and question everything. And even though this video is sped up, I still work at a pretty good pace. I don't do a lot of stopping and thinking. I will at some point, stop and sit down and look at it and view it from a distance and try to figure out, okay, is this, the direction that I want to be going, and is it working, and what isn't working? It's usually more about what isn't working as opposed to is it working. Now I've come back in with some darker values because I felt like they were not dark enough and I didn't have enough contrast. And I think I also come back in with some lighter values as well. At least I hope I do. I can't remember, but looking at it now, I feel like it needs it. So if you have not tried listening to audiobooks or podcasts while you're creating so that you can free up your creative mind to just do, I highly encourage you to give that a try. And if you do that, leave me a note below. Let me know if you really, if that's working for you. I know some folks really love music and really get into almost the spiritual part of music and really allowing it to envelop them completely, and they get into being able to create while in that process, in that state of mind. It's different for everybody. So, if you're feeling stuck and things aren't working, I always say you got to change it up a bit and try something else. All right, so it does look like I'm coming back in with some lighter values. Just squirted some gesso on my palette there. And I really like building up the lighter values. When I'm using white, it's not pure white. It's got some amount of color in it that was maybe on my brush, or I just touched just a tiny bit of paint and add it to the white so that it's not just a stark pure white. And sometimes that means I add a little too much color to it, or maybe I already had too much on my brush. So I like building that up over a period of time, kind of like gradually getting lighter and lighter. If you are not in a position to be able to take a workshop with me in person and you would like to do that, what I can offer you in place of that is I've got an online workshop from a live session that I did. It's a recording from a live session, and it's been extremely popular. And I think it's been really popular because, first of all, it's over 2 hours of us working together creating. I've got some exercises in there. I'm working on 24 by 18 inch paper. And the great thing about this is that during this live online session I did, my sister was my virtual assistant, and she was, I had my earbud in and she was reading questions and I was answering them out loud. So I was repeating the question and answering it out loud. So the recording isn't just me talking about, what I'm doing, but answering probably, I would say 95% of the type of questions that most folks have about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how I'm creating. I talk a lot about it through my process, but I was able to answer a lot of those questions too. So anyway, if you're interested in something like that, I will include that in the notes below. And again, if you can't find it, just message me and I'll be happy to send you a direct link to be able to order that. And the other great thing about it is that it's right on YouTube. So you don't need any fancy password or software to watch it. You can watch it right on YouTube at your leisure, stop and go as you want, and all that good stuff. So we're kind of coming towards the end here, somewhat. I would say, I think we're about 3/4 of the way through. I know it seems surprising because I'm looking at how much more we have to go here, and it seems like we're at the end, but there is more work to be done here. Or I should say there's more. I felt there was more work to be done, so I kept going at it. And certainly, one of the questions that I often get is, how do you know when you're done? And for me, it's after a number of layers have gone down and the colors start pulling together, the composition is looking right, the values are looking good, and it's also, I get to a point where I just don't know what more I could do to it. I don't know what more I could add that is going to enhance it. I can certainly add more, and that just might start messing it up. And I'm sure we've all been there and have experienced that. I know I have, where, I get to a point where I've added way too much and I shouldn't have gone that far. But, that's just part of the learning process. So I get to a point where I'm just in love with it. I just look at it and say, yeah, that's it. It's exactly where I want it to be. And could I do more? Absolutely. The beauty of acrylic paint is you can keep going, let it dry, paint right over it. But at some point you've got to say you're done and sign it and be done with it. So I'm looking at it right now as I'm doing this voiceover, and I'm like, wow, I think it's looking very much done. But yet I do know that I work on it more. And here I'm really doing more fine tuning and adding interest to the piece as I'm trying to balance out my colors as well. I think there I'm using an Indian yellow, and I may have mixed that with sometimes I hold a jar in my hand. I'm not always pulling directly out of it, but I'm just focused on what I'm doing, that I just continue to hold the jar. So I did pull some out of the jar, but I also touched the palette down there, so I'm wondering if I've got some white maybe. The Indian yellow straight out of the jar is very transparent. And so I like to add some white to it to make it a little bit more opaque. Here I've got one of my long brushes, but it's got, I don't know what size that is, but it's got fewer bristles on it, I guess I could say. So it's making kind of the more finer marks. Now these two did end up selling pretty much immediately. I had posted where it was just about done, and somebody locally was very interested in them, and they ended up purchasing them. So super excited about that. I ended up titling them The Love Between. And I'm always happy when two pieces that I work on together go to a home together. They were just, they were meant to stay together. And it really makes me extra happy when I know that they get to stay together and hang out together. So again, I'm just kind of fine-tuning here, focused on, where my eye goes, where do I feel like I need to add more. And there I just continued it right over to the other piece so that they work together. All right, so let's see. Another day. Clearly still warm weather, so I think I created these, I want to say like July or August. And then I'm trying to think now, in September. No, I was trying to remember, it could have been September also. We have pretty warm weather in September. Okay, so I think after I thought about it, it needed more values. And I'm definitely coming in with a brush that doesn't have a whole lot of color on it at all. It's got more white in it than previously. And usually what happens is I was either, sitting and staring at these for a while, or I usually take pictures of them individually so that I can really look at them without all of the noise of my wall, because my painting wall's got a lot of paint on it. And I know people ask me, like, how can you focus on your painting when you've got so much other paint all the way around? And for whatever reason I can. I'm so focused on the artwork itself that I don't notice all the other stuff. But it would be nice to take down that plastic and maybe put up a clean one so that I have less noise happening. It's from painting around the edges like I'm doing here, and then I end up touching the wall, and my wall gets a lot of paint on it. If you notice, some artists that have very clean walls, they usually don't paint the edges of their artwork. You can tell I've also got the fan blowing. My hair's blowing a little bit. So summertime, I've got the fan going, and then as it is right now, the winter time, I've got a heat dish going. I've got one of those round heaters that help warm up that space, but I don't have a ceiling on my studio. The ceiling is way up above. This is an old cannery building, and the ceilings are really high with windows up above. So it is really hard to heat up the space during the winter months because it's just going right up and out. And it being such an old building, I think someone told me it was the early 1900s. I mean, it's been around a long time, and there are so many cracks. Like, I can see from my studio, if I look in a certain direction, I can see the sunlight coming through. So you know that there's like no insulation, and impossible to keep that heat in. But during the winter months, if I do have my heat dish on, I can get the temperature up several degrees. So I guess that's a bonus. It's nice that I can have the heater running. All right, so definitely adding more lighter elements here. You can see how much lighter that is now than it was before. I think it's the angle of this camera, but the canvas on the left seems a little bit bigger than the one on the right, and it's just because the camera is skewed a bit, or the camera is skewing the video a bit. But they are both 30 by 30. Yeah, I'm not crazy about that corner up there. So I just keep working on it. It's all about problem solving is the way I address it or approach it. Is if something's not working well, what can we do differently, or what can I add to it, or what can I take away from it, or can I add larger elements, smaller elements, a different color? So it's all problem solving, and I love that. I think that's one of the things that I love about creating when I get to this stage. You know, the first stage is all about being loose and throwing down color. But then when I get towards the end here, it's solving problems, you know, just trying to figure out what's working and what's not. And I really love that part of it. So I'm putting down circles, and then you can see like there, I think I totally removed it, but sometimes you'll see me like press my rag into it, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to just lighten it a bit so that it's not kind of like, you know, floating on top in your face. And there, you couldn't really see because I was in the way, but I used my finger to just kind of soften those marks. This is why I usually have the camera kind of angled at the side so that so I'm not constantly in the way. But for whatever reason, I decided to move it more centered here. So if you're sticking with me this far into the video, I really want to do a shout out and thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to use this emoticon that I'm going to put up on the screen here, and just put that in the comments, and that's going to let me know that you got this far into the video and that you're sticking it out. So some of these are really hard to see from this distance. I'll be doing a close-up video at the very end. I'm using a script brush here, and I'm just making like scribbly marks with the script brush or a rigger. It's also known as a rigger. I love it because you can make all of those nice lines. Okay, so another day, and I've just got one of them up here, and this is the one that was on the right before. So I'm going to be focusing on finishing it up and making sure that it's looking good by itself. I go over a lot of areas multiple times. for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just so that I can get the right color put down, but other times it's because I like leaving the edges showing so that it creates more dimension and depth to those certain elements. So like there, when I'm adding a little bit of color, I'm not covering the entire piece. So the edges are still kind of that bluish greenish color. And there I'm just adding some water to do drips instead of spraying it. And lifting some with that rag. That's my script brush again. I have a whole lot of paintbrushes, which I bet you can relate to because you try so many different ones or you buy them because they're on sale. But there's always like just a handful that I really like to use all the time. And I would have to say that script brush, absolutely, it's a must have. Love using it whether I'm working small or large. So my hand, I was holding it up because there's, I think, an area that I was trying to figure out, should I leave it in or should I take it out? And I usually cover it with one hand. I do like the two of them together, more so than standing by themselves. I'm nodding my head. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know where to go next. Nope, that color was not the right color. There we go. Okay, so it was that yellow. I was holding up my hand and covering up the yellow. I think that I was feeling like the yellow just wasn't working. And so I went over it, and I know from this distance it's hard to tell, but I think I left a little bit of yellow showing on the edges. So it's not like in your face yellow. There's just a little bit of it now showing. Going right back over those light areas one more time. And really, I'm getting down to the very final part of it now. And when you're working on two pieces, it does take a little bit longer than if you just work on one, because you're kind of like creating a composition for each one. And it doesn't take, I wouldn't say it takes twice as long, and that's what I love about creating two pieces at once, but it does take longer than if I was just to work on one piece. But working in multiples is great because when you're feeling a bit stuck on one, switch over to the other one. Or even, it doesn't have to be two that are working together. You can have, several other pieces that are in progress that you can just bring up and continue to work on. Now, I often don't have a lot of other ones that I'm working on, and that's because I'm just so focused when I create that if I introduce a new one, it's like I have to think about, okay, so what's the color palette for this one? Do I have enough room on my table to switch color palettes? I think that's one of my challenges. And I probably should think about, I just thought of this, I should probably address that in some way, because instead of continuing painting, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just pack it up for the day, because my palette is super wet and I need it to dry so that I can, for example, if I have all blue on there, or not blue, but cool colors, blues, greens, whatever, and I want to introduce some warm colors, then I've got to wait for that palette to dry so that I can start using more colors on top of it. And sometimes I've got like these bowls that I saved from containers, and I will use those if I really want to continue working, and I'll just mix colors within there. But the way that I love to mix colors is I love to have a big space to do that, so that I can put my brush into variety of different colors at once and create a whole new color. And I find that really hard to do when I'm using, for example, the yogurt cups that are very limited in space. But it works as a quick alternative if I'm kind of desperate. And I have been desperate before, because I've got a whole stack of them. I think you can see one of them at the very far right of the screen right now, which is one of the mushroom containers. I've saved a whole bunch of those. So I have used them, but I much prefer being able to use my whole table as a palette, or a good portion of my table as a palette. So I assure you, we really are coming down to the home stretch now. All right, back again. Okay, so now rubbing my hands across it. Just want to make sure that there isn't anything sticking out too far that is going to annoy me. And now I am doing my final mark making. So see, I wasn't wrong. We were in the final stretch. My mark making, unlike the beginning, the very final mark making is a bit more intentional, even though just there I was doing a whole bunch of scribbling. I do love to add scribbles to my mark making on the final piece. And then I like to erase part of it and push it back a bit so that it's not just one continuous line. So here it's going to be a little hard to see what I'm doing, but at this stage, I'm not doing anything too wild and crazy. I am just enhancing it. And oftentimes I'm using colors that I've already used within that painting. And it's just kind of the icing on the cake. It's not too much and it's not too obvious. It's more like if you walk up to it, you're going to see that. But from a distance, and especially where we're standing now videotaping this, it's hard to see all that detail. So I'm going to show that to you when we're done here. But I love that about my paintings, where you can see it from across the room, and if you're drawn in, which I'm hoping that you are, and you walk up to it, then you are getting kind of this little bonus of seeing additional details that to me are just yumminess. Yeah, for lack of a better word to explain it. I use that word yumminess often. So this part is fun. It tells me that I'm at the very end. And I usually like to do my mark making after my final layer dries, at least overnight. I was just working on a piece in my sketchbook journal, and I went right into mark making, and it wasn't totally dry. So what happens is you don't really see those marks on top because you end up scratching that layer of paint off, and you see colors from underneath. So it kind of defeats my purpose of doing that final mark making. I did get through it though, and again, it's just in my sketchbook, so it's not a big deal. But it just reminded me again that the reason why I like to let it dry overnight, so that when I come in here with my pencils and crayons and such, that those marks really show and I'm not scratching into the wet paint. So some of the mark making tools that I like to use, I love Prismacolor pencils, so I've got a whole variety of those. I love Neocolor 2 crayons. Neocolor 2 are not water soluble, and Neocolor 1 is water soluble. And I prefer Neocolor 2 because I really like it when I put down marks early on that when I put paint over it or a little bit of water on it, they move around. They're not set in place. And I do use them on the final layer, but what I do here is when we're completely done, I'm going to be spraying this with a fixative spray. Now I'll include a video here that is going to, let me just write down the time of this. Okay, so I'll include a video here that will send you to a video I created on spraying and varnishing my art on paper. I use the same process for my art on canvas or my art on wood. So same thing. In the video, I'm using a spray varnish to secure or to seal my marks. But since I created that video, which was, I think, a couple of years ago, since then I've been using, I think it's Krylon Fixative, which I really like because it just, it's like a spray varnish too. It doesn't matter, but I just got used to using the fixative. So fixative first, it usually dries within 15 minutes, and then 2 coats of Liquitex varnish. And lately I've been really loving using just a matte varnish, and satin and gloss. Okay, so I like using all three, but for my large pieces, I really like using the matte. All right, so here are some close-ups. Yay, we finally got to the end here. And now you can really see some of those marks that I was making. There's a little bit of a side view there. Like I said, so much more yumminess happening up close. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with me, spending an hour with me, a little more than an hour, and allowing me to kind of talk with you about my whole process and what I like to do and how I do things and the products that I like to use. If you haven't done so, a thumbs up would be so appreciated. Subscribing to my channel, hitting that subscribe or hitting that bell so that you are notified when I release another video. Since it is the end of the year, I want to wish you a super fabulous 2022. If you are into creating art, I hope that it's a super creative year for you. And if you are selling and creating and selling your art, wishing you tons of success this coming year. All right, there they are. And as usual, here's a quick studio tour. I really need a bigger place to spread my paint. They're starting to crawl, to scrunch in. And there you can see the 2 pieces I was working on way in the back there. Those are some of my extra Nova color paints lined up. These 2 also went to the same home together in addition to that larger one there. Super happy about that. And I love the way these turned out. And again, love that they went to someone locally and that they are staying together. And here's a quick look all the way around. And you can see here, this is where I like to sit and stare up at my painting wall, which is a piece of work in itself. All right, so here they are, the love between. And this is some close-up shots of the first one. And that's the, oh, is that the second one? Oh no, that was, I'm not even sure if that was a detail shot or if that was the full shot. These are definitely detailed pictures, and there's a little bit of a side view. All right, and there I am holding the 2 pieces again. All right, thank you for hanging out with me. If you want to check out some more videos, you can do so here, and also you can subscribe here. Wishing you a super fabulous and creative day. Take care.